Hello, welcome back to Theology 345, the Church in the World. We are studying Jacques Ellul. This is our next segment for Jacques Ellul. We'll be dealing with means and ends and the justification of technique. And we'll try to get to the transformative nature of faith in this lecture as well. Okay, we're going to start off with a quote that Jacques Ellul makes on page 51 of The Presence of the Kingdom, dealing with the means and the ends. The means and the ends. The first great fact that emerges from our civilization, Jacques Ellul says, is that today everything has become means. There's no longer an end. We do not know whether we are going. We have forgotten our collective ends, and we possess great means. We set huge machines in motion in order to arrive nowhere. The end, by this I mean the collective end of civilization for individuals, still have their own ends. For instance, to succeed in competition or to get a higher salary and the like, has been effaced by the means. Thus, man, who used to be the end of this whole humanistic system of means, man, who is still proclaimed as in political speeches, has in reality himself become the means. What is he saying there? What he's saying basically is that we have means and ends. You know, we have goals that we want to achieve in life. And I always tell people, I say, well, you know, folks talk about the Trinity all the time, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But what you see in American culture, in American society, is you see power, self-interest, and money as the triune that people achieve. And the goal there is freedom. But what Ellul is suggesting to us in relationship to those kinds of notions is that the means that we are using to pursue the ends have become our life itself. In other words, the means have become the ends for us. Don't get confused by this. Let's go very slowly. The means, most of the time we have means to an end. But Jacques Ellul is saying that our means have become the ends in themselves, that the means that we are utilizing to reach our goals have become those ends, and we no longer have any goals. We are simply caught up in the means. This is very, very important. When we look at the notion of technology and we look at the notion of understanding what we're doing, we simply are a cog in a big machine any longer. Folks no longer have goals. For example, let me use this as an example. The cell phone was a means to produce greater community and greater communication. It has become exactly the opposite. The cell phone has become an end in of itself. And so people now live vicariously inside their cell phones. We talked a little about this, and this is why he's so hard on technology, that the cell phone itself is becoming an end. It used to be an end, a means to an end. It has become an end in itself, that we no longer use it to produce community. We use it to be more individualistic, more introverted than we ever were. The classic example I use all the time is when you go to parties. 50 years ago, when you went to a party, everybody was dancing. Now when you go to parties, what you see is people standing around, leaning on the wall, looking into their cell phone. Same thing in terms of college campuses now. There was a time when college campuses were abuzz. People were talking to each other, interacting with each other. Now when you walk through the halls are basically silent. People are staring down at their particular cell phones. The phones have become a means within themselves, Ellul would suggest, in terms of technology. So that's the first point that I want you to get in that. He says in all spheres of the course of development has been the same. For instance, we must make man happy. In order to make him happy, we must give him plenty of goods to consume. In order to achieve this, a considerable production has to be organized, and then our consumption must be adapted to our production. He's talking about the Walmart reality there, where basically Walmart follows you around with technology and assuages what you buy the most of. and adjusts its market forces based on the kind of consumer consumption that's taking place in its stores. It's an amazing kind of thing that is happening now in terms of these large, big box grocery stores and big box stores that we see like Walmart and Kmart and the like. So we are exposed to a theology of means by essentially, where today everything has become means and there is no end. Okay, gradually, Eliel says, technology and the technical aspect, the technical means become more important than truth. I'm going to turn to page 52. I want you to take a brief look at that. On page 2, he says, gradually technical means become more important than the search for truth. Science has had to become more and more effective for technical purposes, and now science is only significant in terms of technology. Its whole direction is toward applied science. It is at the service of means. It has, thus, what it's talking about is that since everything is means now and pointed toward technology, then the whole notion of being efficient and productive is what we see here. We see this in nursing homes, where we see people with great gifts kind of warehoused and stacked away because they can't move as well, or they're not moving as efficiently and functioning as productively as we would want them to be. The whole society, Eliel says, is shifting in relationship to these means. If you ever been to a senior citizen home and you see how older people are being warehoused, and if ever you've been challenged to look at ageism, ageism is an aspect, and I'm going to post some information online so that you can see that. But to see how we treat our elderly, where the elderly used to be sources of wisdom, no longer. They are not efficient and productive any longer for us. And so we move them out of the center place of our lives. This is something that is being graduated and accelerated with the use of technology. At the same time, we see an obsession with longevity. In other words, trying to stay with technology as efficient and productive as long as possible. Now, moving on, we're going to take a look at this brings us to the justification of technique. And what I want to do is I want to talk about how, because we have moved from pursuing our goals to accepting the means themselves as reality, this moves us toward the deification of technology and the justification of technique. We have to justify why we do the things we do. And so on page 57, for example, he says, in reality today, what justifies the means is the means itself. For in our everyday, in our day, everything that succeeds, everything that is effective, everything in itself efficient is justified. The means by being applied produces a result, and this result is judged by the simplest criteria, everything to which we can apply the adjective more, that is greater, quicker, more precise. If we can do this, the means is declared to be good. Everything that succeeds is good. Everything that fails is bad. Now, techniques infallibly teaches us to discern the means, the only means which contain within itself the most brilliant success, which means technique always and technology always succeeds. This is very, very profound. This is where he is. This is the nexus or the centerpiece of his understanding of what we're dealing with when we talk about this justification of technique and this obsession with technology. Now, and we talked about this earlier, I had spoken about this earlier in terms of social media, but obviously you can see where he's going with this. He's saying that as we become more and more dependent on technology, we shift our emphasis in terms of our faith, not to God, but to technology. You know, we rely on, and we're relying on it more and more. I just was watching a documentary where we don't have to drive anymore. You know, the car will drive us. We don't have to stop on the brakes on time no more. The car will stop for us. We don't have to worry about taking selfies anymore. The phone, when at the proper time, will take its own picture all these things continue to advance on us as we become more and more a slave to the means of technology. This is where LU is, and he's saying that the church has to challenge this. And the reason why the church has to challenge this, because as we shift our faith from God to technology, it erodes the relationship between God and humankind. And so Christians, he challenges, must resist the fact that technology is becoming obsessive, and deal with the reality that we need to be about the business of renewing our faith in Jesus Christ and renewing our faith in God, and not rely so heavily on technology. This is not to say that all technology is bad. That's not what LU, I think, is trying to say. I think he's saying that our reliance on it, our obsession with it, has become a problem, an imbalance that we need to attend to. And he's saying it very, very provocatively. And he's showing points and points again in terms of society where this is taking place. And I will give you a plethora of examples of how technology is moving and has moved beyond the mainstream into our very intimate parts of life, including our bedroom, including our relationships. I mean, if we talk about online dating, it's a norm now. It's something that people do now. And I mean, 50 years ago, people would not have ever conceived the notion of meeting somebody without meeting them face to face. That just wouldn't happen. And so we live in a brand new age, and our young people, especially our children, are growing up in this reality, which makes what LU is saying even more provocative. Okay, so let's move on. Man, as LU has said to us, is no longer in control of means. So he challenges us. He says on page 64, for example, he gives us a challenge. He says basically the first truth which must be remembered is that for Christians there is no dissociation between the ends and the means. It is a Greek ethical idea which has caused this division. The point from which we ought to start is that the work of God, the end, and the means are identical. In relationship to the work of God, the end and means are identical. Thus, when Jesus Christ is present, the kingdom has come upon us. This formula expresses very precisely the relation between the ends and the means. So the relationship between the means and the ends always, from Jacques Ellul's perspective, is the presence of the kingdom, the presence of Jesus Christ in our lives. And so the end is always there for us to be able to actualize in moving through the Holy Spirit in the presence of Jesus Christ, is what Ellul is saying to us. And when that is not happening, then Jesus Christ is not there, and there's something else that we are worshiping. We need to pay very much important in that. I mean, we need to pay a lot of attention to that, as well as he calls us to be alive instead of obsessed with action. One of the things that we'll be talking about, and I will give you some brief information on, is this obsession with scarcity and this obsession with not having enough. Part of this illusion that Jacques Ellul is trying to help us understand is that we are obsessed with not having enough because we are obsessed with the means, and so we spend a lot of time with that. And he says that one of the things that we need to deal with is that we need to consider in our renewal of our faith being alive as opposed to just doing actions, moving in society. A lot of the stuff we do out of a kind of neurotic obsession to think that there is some means to what it is, to our actions, when in fact we're just kind of moving around. If you watch downtown crowds, it's just like we just run from one thing to another. Ellul says we need to take stock of ourselves, and we need to recoup our relationship with God by becoming alive, the spiritual life, and being involved in actions as relates to the spiritual life that produces faith. Look on page 78, if you're following along with me. He talks about the expression of the Holy Spirit. He says, in the powerful presence of the Holy Spirit, we receive the answer to this work of God, and we are bewildered because we no longer are very sure about the way forward, which no longer depends upon us. The end as well as the means has been taken away from us, and we hesitate as we look at this new way which lies open to us, whose end we cannot see. We have only one certainty, and that is, it is the promise which has been made to us of a certain order, which God guaranteed. Seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. L. Ewell is saying that we need to turn to our spiritual life in order to challenge this notion of this justification.